Okay, so now it's time to invite our next presenter. So please welcome to Dr. Jennifer Mcmahon from Livonia Central School District, Livonia, New York of the United States. And she will conduct a workshop. So please welcome our next presenter. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your welcome. My name is Jennifer Mcmahon, and today I am going to be talking to you about the brain science of learning and how that can have implications for leaders and for mentors. So thank you so much for joining me. I am the Director of Learning for Livonia Central School District, which is in New York State in the United States of America. And I'm also the director of the Teacher Leader Academy. So I work with teachers from around the world to help them improve their pedagogy. So I'm going to take just a second, share my screen with you. So before we get started, I'm sure by now you are very familiar with all of the different aspects of Zoom, but just to practice some of the essentials for virtual learning, today is a workshop experience. And so part of that is it's not me just kind of presenting a paper or research findings, but it's really a co-created kind of experience that we need to have together. So in order to do that, I'm going to ask you to kind of step out of your comfort zone and please participate. And the way we do that is in a couple of different ways. So the first thing to be aware of is your mute button and your stop video button. In particular, the turn your video on button, because if possible, I'd love to see your faces. That's kind of how we create a learning community together. And then of course, you're muted by default, but as we have opportunities to have conversation, please unmute and share. The next thing to orient you to is the chat box. By now, again, you're probably very familiar with the chat, but that looks kind of like the little speech bubble. And what I'd love for you to do right now is to locate that and go ahead and introduce yourself. Please tell me your name, maybe where you're from, and then most important, one thing that brings you joy. So I'm going to ask you to find that chat box and go ahead, and I'd like everyone to please share one thing that brings you joy. So it's not easy for me to see the chat. So please go ahead and share something that brings you joy. I truly need you to do this in order for us to have an interactive workshop experience. So I see that somebody has written that teaching and supporting others is something that brings them joy. Thank you so much for sharing your thinking.
So all the participants, our speaker want you to drop the message in the chat. Talk about one thing that brings you joy. So you can drop the message in the chat box here so that our guest speaker can see.
And I have someone else who said that family brings them joy. That's certainly the case for me as well. Others who think family brings them joy. Very good. So please continue to populate that chat with things that bring you joy. It's really important and sort of a central piece of our workshop experience. So I definitely need you to do that, or at least consider something that brings you joy. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Encouraging others to learn well, seeing others smile, studying. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your participation. And the chat box can have a little bit of a delay, so please continue to fill that with all of your wonderful ideas. So the last thing that we're going to do that really supports our virtual learning is the use of breakout rooms. So we are going to use breakout rooms. And while I originally wanted you kind of in partners, we have a nice big group. So you're going to be in a small group for some of our work today. So I love that others are saying that brightening somebody's day or making others laugh is something that brings them joy. Wonderful. All right, thank you so much for that. So just to sort of set some norms for our time together, in order to co-create this experience, it's really important that we are comfortable and we feel safe so that you can take risks. Simply writing into the chat box is sort of a risk for some people. So I want to say thank you so much for the people that did kind of step out of their comfort zone and share their joy. One other thing we'll be doing today is working hard together. We'll make sure that we're respecting others. And most of all, we're going to have fun as we learn. So these are our norms for today. Now, some of our learning objectives, we're going to discuss several key understandings from the science of learning. We'll explore a framework for mentorship and leadership that draws upon those understandings. And then we're going to consider how those key understandings can be put into practice. So I want you to be able to take everything we're learning and put it into your own context, whether you are a teacher leader, a mentor, a professor, a school administrator. I want you to be able to think about how what we're learning applies to you and your situation. So to begin with, I just want to orient you to this framework for leadership and mentorship. And so it's some kind of prerequisites we keep in mind when we're working with others and doing some collaborative work, whether we're working with students or people that we may be mentoring, staff members, family members, students' families. So it's important that we have a sense of calm and connection, that people are engaged and participative, that they feel challenged yet supported, and reflective. And so we're going to be talking about each of these pieces in the context of the brain science of learning. So as we move forward, the first thing we're going to do is go to a breakout room. And we're going to play a quick game of Would You Rather? So as I said, originally this was intended to be just partners, but you'll have a small group in your breakout room. And I'm going to ask you to choose either option 1 or option 2, and then talk about why you chose it with your small group. So in your breakout room, you're going to talk with a partner or your small group. You'll introduce yourself, tell where you're from, and then I want you to think about which of these you would choose. Would you rather be able to sing really, really well, but be unable to dance? Or would you rather be able to dance really well, but be unable to sing? So as you can see, we're starting out with such a very difficult question. So hopefully in your small groups, you'll have a chance to share. Would you rather do option 1, sing well, but be unable to dance? Or option 2, be able to dance well, but be unable to sing? So I'm going to ask our backstage moderator to please invite you to the breakout so that you can introduce yourself to one another and then also answer that question. And you have about 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Jennifer. So, ladies and gentlemen, so right now our presenter would like you to work in pair. So our IT supporter will make a breakout room, and then you just join breakout room, and then you will go directly into pair, and then you can say about your information, where you from, and the other thing that our presenter has shared on the screen there. Yes, so please, all the participants, click on join, and then you will have a pair to do a pair work with the other participants.
Hello, can you hear me? Để sang.
Ladies and gentlemen, can you join the breakout room? You just click on join the breakout room, and then you will go automatically to the breakout room, and then you will have the pair. The first in the breakout room, you will talk with your partner and introduce yourself by telling your name and where you're from. And then you discuss if you would rather have option 1, think but not dance, or option dance but not think. You have 3 minutes to do this pair work. Ladies and gentlemen, so our presenter wants you to join in the break room so that you can work with your partner. Like you have to introduce yourself and then telling your name, where are you from, and then discuss whether you would choose option sing but not dance or dance but not think. So you have 3 minutes to join the breakout room. You just click on join, and then you will go automatically to work in your pair. Hello, all the participants. Can you see the
Yes.
you can click on join, and then you will automatically in your pair, and then you just introduce yourself, your name, where are you from, and then you have to discuss, or you are able to sing, or you are unable to dance like this.
So during this time, people are in their breakout rooms. Obviously, if you chose not to go, that's fine. If you're having trouble finding your breakout room, you can simply go to the bottom where it says breakout rooms, maybe because the invitation flashes on the screen. So if you just click the button at the very bottom that says breakout room, it does bring your invitation back up. But the other thing is, and we're going to talk about what was required in order to feel comfortable participating like this. So, so no worries if you chose not to participate. We're still going to talk about it in just a second. And moderator, we have someone who was in room 28 with no one else.
Hello, doctor. I think it is a great activity, and maybe everyone is joining the break room and enjoy this activity.
So they should return after about three to 4 minutes.
Yes, there's only 3 minutes.
So I'd love to ask, for people that are still here, I'd love to ask our moderator, which would you choose, option 1 or option 2?
For me, option 1. Yes, so me, I will choose option 1. I will be able to think, but I am not able to dance. And
So
how
if
about you, doctor? Which one you choose, option 1 or number 2?
Oh, I'm option 1 for sure. I love to sing, and I already know I can't dance. So if I had to choose, I know I could live my life with option 1.
It's the same me. I like to think.
So if we're finding we don't have a partner, I don't know if our ICT partner can help with that, but otherwise we can just come back and play. So if you could just let me know when everyone is back from the breakout room.
Excuse me.
Are the breakout rooms closed?
Yes, doctor, our breakout room is finished. And then you can go on your activity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. So I want to debrief this experience with you because a number of things happened that are completely connected to the brain science of learning, and because a calm and connected brain matters. And so I want to just have a chance to talk through what happened and what didn't happen. So I, first of all, offered you this opportunity to go to a breakout room, talk about something kind of silly. It doesn't really matter whether or not you prefer to sing, and if you had your choice, if you could sing but not dance, or dance but not sing. That's not the important thing. But it was an opportunity for you to get to know somebody else or a small group of other people. But what happens with Zoom sometimes is some people get kicked out. Sometimes the breakout rooms don't get set up quite right. And so you may end up without anyone. So in this experience, there were people who took the risk to kind of go out and meet other people. And then there were people that maybe they weren't able to join the room. And then there were some that joined and then they got there and there wasn't anyone there. So the goal of this activity is to help people feel a little more connected. First of all, it's very difficult in a virtual setting and with only about an hour's worth of time to really create that professional learning community feeling that we need. But it is sort of a prerequisite for deeper learning. We need to feel safe. We need to feel like we can take risks and ask questions. And so doing something like this is a way to help calm the brain and help us feel connected. So one of the things that I would recommend is that as a mentor, as a teacher leader, whether you're doing meetings or individual sessions, that it's really important to consider how you are developing the relationship with the people that you're working with. And it's not something to just to think that this is just sort of what we would call like fluffy. It's not something that is not important. It's actually extremely important, even though it looks like it's silly or basic. It is a way for us to feel connected. In my work with teachers around the world, but in particular in Cambodia, it took us a really long time to feel like we could all trust one another. So we did a lot of these kinds of activities just so that we could laugh together. And when you laugh with other people, it really does help us kind of lower our inhibitions a little bit and feel a little bit more comfortable. So I want to make sure that, sorry, I'm just going to check and make sure that I'm not muted. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me?
Yes, doctor, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, some people in the chat are saying that they can't hear. So I just want to make sure it's not me. But anyway, this is, it's a brief activity, but when we debrief this experience, you can see that having an opportunity to feel connected does make a difference. So let's talk about how that's connected to the research. So when we think about our brain, it's very complicated. Scientists are still learning about it even now. But what we know is that when we are faced with stress or something that scares us, the part of the brain that controls our ability to reason, this prefrontal cortex, sort of, we bypass that and we go right to the amygdala or our limbic system that takes over. And so some people call this the reptilian brain. It simply means that when we perceive something as a threat, then we just react. So this was really helpful in a situation where maybe you've encountered a poisonous snake or a dangerous animal, and you have that, you either freeze or you run away. And so our body is prepared to do that because our brain is just immediately going to go right into that process. It's not as helpful if you are perceiving something like learning as a threat. So it helps if you're in real danger, but there are many students and there are many adults that when they feel unsafe, then we have something called an amygdala hijack. This was a term that was first coined by Daniel Goleman, who wrote about it in his book, Emotional Intelligence, Why It Can Matter More Than IQ. I'm sure many of you are familiar with his work. And so this idea that our brain, when it is not calm, can make it very difficult for us to learn, is something that's really important for us to consider, especially when we are working with teachers that we're mentoring or students. We need to be aware that a calm and connected brain really matters for learning. So some strategies that we can use to avoid the amygdala hijack. So the first thing is that idea of feeling connected. We want people to feel like they can take risks, like they can ask questions, like it's a safe place. So one strategy is something that we've done today already. I started by asking you about something that brings you joy. Pretty low pressure in the sense that all you have to do is type that into the chat. We didn't ask you to unmute and share that, just sort of think about something that brings you joy as you look through the list of people who are writing about their family or who love learning. All of those are things that suddenly we kind of feel connected. So then we went to a breakout room and we talked about something kind of silly. That was an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to others and then also to share your thinking, not about deep work that we're doing, but in this case, it was just about something kind of maybe you hadn't thought about before. And so the idea is that a calm and connected brain matters for learning. And so as we think about these things, that can help us when we're mentoring or working with students. Another very important thing is the art of listening. So practicing listening is very important. People feel safe when they feel heard. So one of the ideas that you might consider is actually practicing the process of listening. You can do that with maybe a group of 3 or 4 people, but usually what you would do is have one person be the speaker, one person be the listener, and have somebody else take notes, and then have them switch roles, have the person take notes, and then debrief what that was like. How did they show that they were actively listening? What are some things that you might want to work on so that you can show that you're actively listening? So those are just a couple of quick strategies that you might use to help avoid the amygdala hijack. So engagement and participation also matter. So I'd like you to just consider this scenario. Students are randomly assigned into 2 groups. Both groups are given math puzzles to work on. Group A is told after completing the first set of puzzles, "Wow, you are so smart. You were chosen to be in this group because you are naturally gifted math students. So here are some more challenging problems. You could continue to work on the first set, or you could work on these." Then group B is told, "You were recommended by your teacher because you work hard and persevere." That means you don't give up. You can continue working on the first set of puzzles or try these more challenging ones. So I'd ask you to consider, what do you think happened? Please write your thoughts in the chat.
So our participant, our presenter want you to write whether you can look at the scenario, these 2 scenarios, and then what do you think happened, and then you can write your thought in the Zoom chat box here. Thank you.
So as you can see, not many people are comfortable just kind of putting their ideas. Ooh, I have somebody who is though, so that's great. Wonderful. What I was going to say is often people are not necessarily comfortable just openly thinking about that and then writing their thoughts. You have to be in a much more calm state and more connected state to really take that kind of risk and just process and think about any answer. So what I would do is, if people were unsure, then I would just explain, so group A or group B, so you could just write either group A or group B, which one do you think is more motivated to do the more difficult puzzles? And I see somebody actually wrote, group A will be more motivated, but group B is not. Interesting. And then others have said both groups would be willing to participate. Great. And then somebody else says group B. Okay, Group A, we have a mix. We have a mix. So I'm going to talk to you about growth mindset because this is an experiment that Carol Dweck and her team of researchers at Stanford University, very similar to this experience. So what they did is they told one group of students that they were naturally smart, and then they gave them the opportunity to do more difficult projects or puzzles. And they had a different group of students that they basically reminded that they were hard workers, and they also gave them the opportunity to do more difficult puzzles. So group A, they were told smart. Group B, they were told they work hard. So what they found is that group A was less likely to take on the more challenging work, and group B was more likely to do that. And what they kind of have concluded is that it is based on growth mindset. So when we have a fixed mindset, it is the idea that intelligence is fixed, that we're born naturally talented or naturally smart, that some people are smart and some people aren't. And so these students that were told that they were in that group because they were smart, it was almost like they were afraid to do anything that might challenge that idea of them being smart. And so what Carol Dweck and her team have found is that when we help students understand that learning is not something that being smart is not something that you're just born with, but that it is something that you can become. When students or even adults are taught that, it can actually help increase their motivation to continue to learn, and it can make them more successful. So let's take a look here at the slide that I've put up here. In a growth mindset, it's the idea that hard work will give us good results. People with a fixed mindset, or when we're in a fixed mindset, is the idea that people are born smart or talented. Again, in a growth mindset, it's the idea that we can learn new things. You'll see when we have a fixed mindset, often people will make statements like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not a math person. Or, oh, I'd never be able to do that. I'm not a good artist. But when you have a growth mindset, you have this idea that we can learn just about anything. And so smart is something you can become. The other thing that can show up when we have a fixed mindset is thinking about students according to maybe what we know about their family or their family background. So maybe we wouldn't give them as many opportunities or let them take an advanced class because we have this idea that, oh, they are from that particular area or they're from that particular family, so they're not going to be able to do this work. So growth mindset really matters. So again, going back to the experience that the scenarios, in group A, they weren't as willing to take the risks because they had this idea that they didn't want to have to, what if they fail? And when you think that you're born smart, that you can't get smarter, then people are afraid to take risks. Group B, on the other hand, they were told that if they work hard, they can grow. And so they were willing to try the more difficult task. So let me go forward here and just talk a little bit about how this relates to leadership and to mentoring. So growth mindset is an important aspect of engagement and participation, because when learning is relevant, this idea that I can become smart, then learners are willing to commit to that hard work that is necessary to learn. So I want to move forward and again, have you consider 3 different scenarios. In each of the scenarios, I want you to be thinking about who is doing the work and who is doing the learning. And I'm going to start kind of to frame this with the idea that the person that is doing the work is the person who is speaking, they are asking questions, they are reading, they are discussing, and they are thinking. That's what I mean when I say who is doing the work. And ultimately, that is the person learning. So let's look at scenario A. In scenario A, the teacher asks a question. Student A raises her hand and then stands up when the teacher calls on her, and then she answers the question. So let's look at just scenario A. In scenario A, who is doing the work? When I consider who is speaking and who is doing the thinking. And if you want, you can write that in the chat box. We have two people right now, right? We have a teacher who's asking the question. So I would say that the teacher is definitely doing some work. And we have one student, and she is answering the question. So right now, thank you, yes, only the teacher and one student. So consider for a moment what everybody else in the class is doing. Right now, it is a one-to-one situation. The teacher's asked the question, one student has answered. Let's move to scenario B. The teacher asked the students to take turns reading passages from a history book. They begin at the front of the room, and then they proceed in order until all of the students have had a chance to read. So in this case, we have a teacher who's asking questions, and then all of the students are participating, right? Because they're all reading. Do you agree with that when I say all of the students are participating? So what I want you to think about for a minute is at the time that the student is reading, you could possibly say that they're doing the work. But we all know, if you've been in a classroom and you've seen this, what happens is all of the students will count to see when it's their turn. And when they're done, they're done. And when they're waiting, they're probably reading ahead or they're doing something else. So usually what happens in this scenario is, again, it's the person who in that moment is reading and the teacher who are working. The rest of the students are kind of, maybe they're anticipating their turn, or once their turn is over, they're probably talking to their friend or something like that. So let's consider the very last scenario. The teacher poses a question, then asks students to turn to the person next to them to discuss what they think the answer might be. Students discuss their thinking, turn back to the teacher, and then the teacher calls on a few of the students to share their thinking. In this scenario, who is doing the work? Students. Not just one student, every single student. We have full engagement because every student is speaking. And even though the teacher didn't call on every student had a chance to share because they had a partner to talk to. So when we think about this idea of engagement and participation, and we can frame it in terms of who is doing the work, this becomes actually a very simple way when we're mentoring or coaching to help our teachers that we're working with to see what's really happening in the classroom. And sometimes we might put together an amazing lesson, but it's really us doing all of the work. So as much as possible, when students are doing the work, when students are doing the talking and the thinking, that's where the real learning takes place. So one more quick would you rather, this time in the chat box. So this has to do with thinking about getting ready to take an exam. So imagine that there is going to be a big exam and you have a couple of choices for studying. You can either read the text over and over until you feel confident, maybe highlighting important points, or you can read the text once and take a quiz on it. Would you choose 1 or 2? Please go ahead in the chat and write either 1 or 2. So we have a mixture of 1s and 2s. Great. So what I want to talk about is some of the brain science that's happening here. So the truth is that the brain science on learning says that it's really best if we can just read it once, take a quiz on it so that we're retrieving that information, and then we take our exams. However, students around the world choose usually number one to do. They want to feel comfortable and confident, so they read over and over and over. And what happens is they mistake familiarity with learning. So we might read the same text and highlight and feel really good because when we read it over and over, we're thinking, oh yeah, I know that, I know that. But unless we make our brain retrieve that information, we haven't really learned it, not long term. So many students, university students everywhere, really tend to prefer the idea of just reading it over, highlighting it. They feel comfortable. But the thing about learning is that it's not really, when we are comfortable is not usually when we're learning. We have to do work to learn. So if you want learning to stick, we have to do something that forces us to retrieve things from our memory. So in that example we just discussed, it's an example of low stakes quizzing. And we ask students about their reading, or better yet, if they ask themselves about what they've read, so maybe generating their own questions, it causes them to retrieve that information, which then makes a pathway in the brain. And so it really helps us to be able to remember the information and really learn it. So that's an example of low stakes quizzing. The next idea is called spaced repetition. So the idea is if like you're walking through a jungle without a path and you cut down the vines and you kind of tramp down the grass in front of you and you make this path. You're doing a lot of work in the beginning to make that path. But each time that you take that same path, it gets easier and easier for us. And so this is the same idea that happens with spaced repetition. So if you take a quiz or you do something that requires you to retrieve that information, and you do it at points of time where you're just about to forget. So again, it makes not to the point where you've completely forgotten it, but if you wait just long enough, then it's going to make your brain work that much harder. And when our brain is working, we're doing the learning, and that allows us to really recreate that and move it from short-term memory to long-term memory. So that's called spaced repetition. The last trick is called interleaving. And with interleaving, it's the idea that we are going to interleave or back and forth do our learning in different ways. So an example of this would be like in mathematics. It's a tendency for us to learn do a number of different problems using the same formula. And then we move on and we do a new unit where we learn a number of different problems using a different formula. But the recommendation is to actually interleave these, to do a few problems with one formula, do a few problems with another, do a few problems with another, and go back and forth because it forces our brain to work a little harder. And so the research studies, again, show that people are not comfortable with this. Most people really dislike it because it feels like you're not learning. So when they've done studies, they've shown that they'll give sort of a survey afterwards and ask students how they feel as far as being prepared. And usually the ones who've had massed practice, meaning they've done the same thing over and over and over and over, they feel very confident. And the students that have had interleaving do not. But the results on a final exam show that the students with interleaving actually learned it better. They had a chance to compare and contrast. They had a chance to force their brain to do a lot more work. So that idea of mass practice goes back to that initial scenario that I shared, where students feel really comfortable rereading the text, but they haven't done the work to retrieve. So these are some examples that help us move things from short-term to long-term memory. And it's this idea that we need to be challenged, so that's how we learn, but then also supported. And so when you think about what this means as a mentor and a leader, I'd like you to think about how you might use this in your role. And I'm not going to ask you to share it right now. I just want you to take 1 second, think about what strategy might you use and how might you use it in your role. If this is new learning for you, how might you share this? How would this, because again, it's counterintuitive. That means that people don't naturally think that this is going to be helpful for them. So I'm going to ask you to consider one of the topics we've discussed so far today and think about how it may have resonated with you, and think about how you might apply this in your context or in your role. Now, I originally planned this as a breakout room. I'm not going to have you go to a breakout room today. I'm going to ask you just to consider this on your own so that we'll have some time for questions and answers. And I also want to make sure that I get to our last piece in that mentoring framework that I shared. And I want to talk about reflection, because reflection is the glue that puts it all together. So what I had asked you to do in the breakout room just a moment ago, which I'm asking you to kind of just do on your own, is to reflect, to think about what you've learned and how that applies to your context. And so when we reflect, it's a way to help us explore our feelings so that we feel calm and connected. It's a way to ensure engagement, because the one that is writing and thinking and doing the work is the one that's learning. And it's a way to practice retrieval. So as we recall events or situations and consider what went well or what didn't go well, then we sometimes consider those alternatives, and that helps us deepen our learning. So if you want that glue of reflection to be even stickier, some of the things that I would recommend working as a mentor or a leader is have a daily habit of personal journaling. So whether you are a teacher and you are writing about what went well with the lesson, what didn't go well with the lesson, or if you are a leader and you're working with others and you think about conversations that you might have had and you journal and you just kind of script what happened. That allows us to, after kind of sleeping on it and looking back, it helps us organize our thoughts, and it allows us to really improve as we think about things we might do differently next time. Another idea as a mentor is to then have certainly encourage the people you're working with to have this daily habit of journaling, and then make that reflection more visible through a double entry journal. So the way this would work is that the teachers or leaders that you're working with would write their thinking and then share that with you as their coach or their mentor or their leader. And then you have the opportunity to ask questions right in their journal to just probe their thinking and help them see how they may have done something that they thought didn't go well. You might be able to help them see the good in it, right? That, well, let's look at what you've learned from that situation. So that's a double entry journal. And then the last thing that really helps with reflection is something like video coaching. So you can either have the student or the teacher record their lesson and just reflect personally, or again, something that a coach or a mentor can do is look at that lesson with them. And so there are many different kinds of platforms that you can use for that, but it's a great opportunity for you to then help them deepen their learning through reflection. So to wrap up, the brain science of learning is very clear that we need to feel calm and connected. We build inclusion. We create a caring and professional learning community. We need to help people feel engaged, and we want to encourage participation. We really focus on who is doing the work and fostering a growth mindset. And we want to make sure for learning that we keep the brain challenged, but that we keep the people supported. So we use low stakes quizzing, spaced repetition, and interleaving. And then also, most important is reflection. So you have to contextualize your information, consider new ideas, make sure that you're self-evaluating and setting goals. And this is how all of the pieces that basically these key understandings from the brain science can help us as leaders and mentors. So your ticket out the door today is to please drop in the chat one thing that you have learned and that you hope to use. And then I have an invitation for you for sustainable learning. So if you would like to experience spaced repetition, low stakes quizzing, and interleaving, we will be putting a Google form in the chat box. So if you want to try it for yourself, I will be sending you a low stakes quiz tomorrow, in 2 weeks, and in 2 months. And that's going to allow you to have the opportunity to try for yourself, because I'll be asking you questions about low stakes quizzing, growth mindset, all of the things that we've talked about today. And I'll be doing it in a variety of ways. If you want to help yourself, the very best thing you can do is after a presentation is to try to write down everything that you remember, then sleep on it, because our brain organizes our thinking as we sleep, and then take a look at it and see if there's anything you want to add. So that's just a quick tip if you want to make sure that you ace your low stakes quiz. But the Google form will be dropped right into the chat, and you'll have the opportunity to participate if you so choose. You just need to write your email address, whichever you prefer, and I'll send it to you. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. And I want to open it up and give you the opportunity to ask me any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor, for giving the grateful workshop. So I will drop the link for quiz for our participants. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions, you can drop in the chat box here so that our presenter will answer your question.
So I did see somebody asked if they could have the slides. Absolutely. I'm more than happy to share those with you. So I'll make sure I collect your email. Go ahead and make sure you fill out that form. Just that way I'll have your email. Ooh, how to deal with group thinkers at work. Would you say just a little more about that? Just kind of the context of your work and what you might mean. Is it Peach? And feel free to unmute if you want, just so that we can clarify your question.
So our participants, can you clarify your question to make it better to understand?
So
okay,
it says
you can drop your detailed question. You can explain your question, meaning in the chat box here, so that our presenter will answer your question.
So I can just answer in general as far as what I think you mean by group thinkers at work. So when you have people that are, they have one idea and then it seems like everybody is sort of chiming in with that same idea. I'm assuming that's what you mean by groupthink. How do you help people break out of that? So sometimes there are people, and very often there are people that have different ideas, but maybe they're too shy, or we haven't established a culture that allows them to really step out of their comfort zone. So the number one thing I would say is to really work on developing that culture. I can tell you again that working with teachers that are from Cambodia, that it took us a really long time. It's this is year 2 for me working with them. And it really took us a long time to just get comfortable. And we do a lot of just laughing and enjoying one another to kind of build that culture. And then we have that foundation. So now we can dig into some really more difficult topics. So I would say that if you have people that are sort of just kind of go with maybe what the strongest voice is, that working hard to help bring out some of those quieter voices is a really important job of a leader. And so you can do that with one-on-one conversations, but just helping to see, again, I think going back to growth mindset, that's also another way when we tell people and help people understand that where they are right now is not where they have to stay, that we can help them through reflection and through goal setting and building their skill set. We can help them to be even better. And so if they are not confident with their ability, for example, then one thing we can do is to help build them up and show them all of the things that they are capable of doing. Are there other questions?
Okay, so thank you very much for your answer. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have any question, you can drop in the chat box here. And for the email here, you can go to the link and then complete your email. And then our presenter will drop the quiz in 1 day, 2 months after the conference, and it demonstrates several learning practice. So you can click on the link and then complete your email. So Doctor, I think maybe our participant has no question more. Okay, so do you have anything to say to our participants?
I do. I just want to say to all of you, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, just remember that I've invited you for some sustainable learning. So please go ahead and fill out the form if you're interested. I will be sending you a quiz tomorrow and in 2 weeks and in 2 months. So in 2 months, you may be surprised and think, wait a minute, I'd forgotten that I'd even signed up for this. But you will be amazed by how much you will remember. So I like to demonstrate that because I think sometimes we read about the research, but unless we really apply it ourselves, then we don't truly understand how powerful it is. So again, I want to say thank you to all of you, and please reach out to me. My email address is right on the slide. So if you have any follow-up questions, please, please, please do not hesitate to contact me. And then also, I love collaborating with others. So if you are interested in action research or any kind of collaboration, please definitely reach out to me for that as well. So thank you so much. And have a
so thank you very much, Doctor, for your great sharing, and very thank you to all the participants for the attending in this session. Okay, so thank you very much for all the participants and our doctor that attend this session. So our session is come to the end, and thank you very much. Yes, so I wish all of you good luck. Thank you. Goodbye.